Well, welcome to Public Works Committee. It is July 10th in the city by the lake. And today we have an exciting show for you. And directly from the wastewater department is item 1. Jim Rentz and Mike Anderson. Welcome, Mike. And Jim.
Thank you. I'll take the lead on this one. This is a professional services agreement with HDR for kind of an as-needed services for our wastewater discharge permitting assistance. This will kind of formalize an informal agreement we had with HDR over the years for providing this service for us to keep us abreast of permitting issues and keep us kind of proactive when it comes to the permitting process. So we would ask the council's approval, recommend the council's approval for approving this agreement with HDR.
Mr. Gookin, any questions?
Of course, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, you answered my first question, which was, is there a previous agreement in place? So there really isn't.
There is not, but we've been using HDR for at least the last 10 years for these services.
How do you pay them if there's no agreement?
Good question. We pay them, and that's why we're coming forward with an agreement.
Have we been paying them too much?
Not too much. We pay them for their services.
Okay.
But there's been no formal agreement for this technical assistance that we could find.
Did this have to go out to bid?
No, we're using HDR as the Idaho statute allows us to continue with a firm that's been involved with this issue, with these issues.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to go out to RFQ, not really to a bid.
You said that the cost of the agreement in the staff report, cost of agreements included with the annual financial plan. What is that amount?
We budget for all technical assistance, permit compliance issues, attorneys, everybody else, about $100,000 a year.
Okay. Now, they're not going to go ahead and grab all 100K, are they?
No, this is strictly on an as-needed basis, so when Mike or the staff has some questions regarding permitting, we contact them and develop a little mini task scope of work.
Regarding permitting, I think I read something that said that something happens in 2019.
Yes.
What is that?
We will be issued a new permit in 2019.
Okay.
And the new permit will be issued by the state of Idaho Department of Environmental Quality.
As opposed to EPA.
As opposed to EPA. So part of this agreement is for HDR to attend some of the rulemaking meetings for the IPDES permit. And that essentially the rulemaking and the criteria for permit writers. So they're kind of acting on our behalf.
Okay.
You know, when they're establishing the rules, it would behoove the city to be actively involved in that through HDR.
Okay. And this is the state of Washington still impact us, even though DEQ is doing the permitting?
I'm sure, yeah, their Department of Ecology will have some say into our next permit.
It was an interesting editorial, I don't know if you guys caught it in the press, that talked about how we have to regulate our effluent because it flows into Washington, but yet they can burn down a forest and it blows over here, and we have no control over it. That's just not fair.
Yeah, yeah.
Get our forest guys on that.
Definitely, our big fans.
Dan, you have any questions?
Well, that answered some of it. It sounds like, well, I was curious about how often and in a year's time we use it, which is one thing, but it also sounds like you're anticipating kind of ramping up, some of their services, and then I guess related to that, is this such a specialized area of knowledge that our own in-house staff can't do it?
Yes, I think it's specialized. The HDR folks are very accomplished at keeping abreast of the permitting in Idaho, Washington, Oregon, the whole Pacific Northwest. So they'll keep abreast of this stuff and make us aware of any issues that are coming down the road that may impact us.
Sounds good.
Good. I had a couple questions on the economics of it. So in the past, it hasn't had its own budget line. Is that correct?
We've been charging it out of that line item
That one
in the
is-
budget, right. But we never had a formal written agreement for those services.
Okay, so the way we see it in the budget, it's not going to change?
That's correct.
Still under that line?
That's correct.
And this $8,000 to $9,000, $266 an hour, is that what you plan on working with, or is there some movement in there?
Well, we divided, we put the scope of services together into two tasks. One task is for HDR to attend the rulemaking committee meetings in Boise for the IPDES permitting kind of on our behalf. So we want to fund that effort from HDR. And then task two is this kind of as-needed, undefined scope, but as needed as we need technical assistance for permitting at their hourly rates.
I think I got it.
So just, thank you, Woody. Is it the PCB and permit issues line item in the budget?
I
You
believe
probably
so,
don't.
or permit compliance, there's one that's
It
like
is?
100
It's
or
115,
115, yeah.
so that's it right there.
Right.
So it's already, because it shows the same amount was allocated last year.
Yes.
Same
yes.
amount this year.
Yeah.
So this just kind of formalizes what you guys have been doing.
That's right.
And we like formalizing.
Well, yeah, because when we get an invoice for their technical assistance, there was no agreement to
Yeah.
refer to, and sooner or later, it was going to become an issue, so.
No one complained, did they? Was there someone else?
Not from the city end and not from the HDR end, but they could not find any written agreement either, so.
Okay.
So I think it's best for both parties to have something in writing.
One last question, Mike, do you see yourself being in the middle of all that?
Yeah, so I've already been getting involved in that on the Washington side, mostly for the Spokane River with the DOE on Washington side, with PCBs and things like that. But to answer your question as well, Dan, is that, yeah, although you have a general grasp of how these things are working, and but it really would behoove us to have somebody specialized who really does it for a living. You know, I mean, if I know the 30,000 foot kind of overview of how the discharge permits are created and assembled, it helps that you really know the guys down in the trenches, for example.
But you're still going to be attached?
Absolutely.
Okay. 'Cause I think that's, I mean, you're the face of this besides the old guy there. Just kidding, just kidding.
Right.
The experienced guy I meant, sorry. I won't do that to you.
Woody's making friends.
Don't make it then. So, you know, you're the kind of the face of the
Very much so.
department, and
And that's
Sid
right.
used to do with the kids and
Yeah.
the tours, and that's part of that knowledge, that you have to turn in that engineering talk into normal language so we can understand it.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So that's the plan.
And get all that experience from Mike there. All right. I'm
Good, okay. I would make a motion to recommend to council that they approve the attached professional service agreement between the City of Coeur d'Alene and HDR Engineering for wastewater discharge permitting assistance. The services for the wastewater department will be performed on an as-needed basis.
Second.
Been moving second. Any other discussions, questions, ideas? Thoughts to bail me off, Mike, here? No? All those in
Just keep
favor say
moving.
aye.
Aye.
Consent, please. Thanks, you guys.
Okay.
Mike, love me, man. Okay. All right, streets, it's usually Tim, but the new guy's here. Mike,
The
don't
new
be
guy. You've
afraid.
been here for over a year,
Yeah,
haven't
well,
you?
we haven't seen him though, right? Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Martin sends his apologies for not being able to be here. Unfortunately, he did have a family emergency, so thank you for the opportunity to come up here and present on his behalf. So I bring before you the request to purchase a new rubber-tracked excavator. You may recall that in this year's budget, we had approved $17,000 to enter into a purchase agreement for 5 years on this excavator. Since then, we believe that we found a way to buy this machine outright with the help of the drainage utility. This makes sense to us for the simple fact that the majority of the work that this machine will be doing will be in support of that utility. The drainage utility did have some savings this year and has found that they would be able to help us out in the remainder. So what we propose to do would be to take our $17,000 from this year's budget that's approved, and the drainage utility would pick up the additional $81,000, and we could buy this machine outright. And the thought process would be that we would be able to save ourselves the interest over the 5-year period.
Questions?
Yes. Hi, Mike.
Sir?
And you have to be named Mike to be an employee in the city. so
Good one.
just- Okay, so I have a lot of questions about this. So you weren't going to rent it, you were going to buy it over time, right?
Correct. We
That-
were not going to rent it. We
And it
were-
was $17,000 a year for 5 years?
Yes, sir.
So total is $85,000.
17,000 was a budgeted number. Of course, we didn't, until we were able to go out and get bids on the equipment, we didn't know exactly where that number would fall, but 17,000 was our target number to pursue getting this piece of equipment, if that makes sense.
But 17 times 5 is $85,000.
Correct. Correct.
How would you budget it if you didn't know what the final amount would be?
Because as time progresses, the costs shift a little bit in different.
Troy is
The
rest-
money guy comes up.
I know this isn't your deal and that it was an emergency that you
Sure,
came here, so
sure.
I apologize if I'm putting
No-
you on the spot.
No problem. I expected it.
But so I'm doing the math here, and I'm trying to figure out, so you budget 5 years, $17,000, you're figuring, I guess, that the cost is gonna be $85,000, which if you're budgeting for 5 years would include the interest, but I don't know if that's how you're doing things or not. So Troy's sitting here and he's going to answer the question.
Good question. When we look into the crystal ball as far as budgeting goes, we don't have any exact quotes in front of us, and the demand has gone up for these units. We also look at what interest rates might do or the lease cost. And in this situation, the lease cost is more than what even I would have forecasted. So this proposal brings forward two benefits. One, we need the piece of equipment and it's jointly used, thus the split in the purchase. And secondarily, this isn't a piece of equipment that the manufacturers want back at the end of the term, like the loaders that you've approved. So there's no residual at the end that we've experienced. So basically, the manufacturers are sharing with us a valuable discount to go in and make the purchase on the front end. That's why we brought it forward to you this way. We can't show you any great savings on lease rates, and there's no residual at the end of the 5 years. And this utility and the streets department is extending the life of this probably 10, 12 years on these pieces of equipment. So we probably missed it a little bit on the budgeting side to make that work for you to take a look at. We've been negotiating, and Mike's been doing a great job with those manufacturers to see if we could get it down to 5 years or 6 years to keep it within a decent time range. So we put some work into bringing it to this point.
Okey dokey. So you want to go ahead and buy one of them for $98,000 and then split the cost between the money that was budgeted in streets and then the rest coming from savings in the drainage utility.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will have questions later, but go ahead, guys.
I just wonder, looking at that, is there room for the ride-along for, I got to ride in one of the fire trucks the other day, and I know we can go out on the
Doesn't look like
snow plow, but,
It does come with a 4-foot bucket attachment. I'm sure we can make something work.
okay,
For you.
hey, then that's good, I'm good, okay. No, actually, I think this is a time where it makes sense to own it, have it, and, with the life of it expected, that, anyway, for me makes sense, so.
So I have to ask Troy, if the savings from stormwater, you don't call it that, what do you call it now?
Drainage utility.
Drainage utility, how do you save money there? Is it some projects you weren't able to get to?
And share that information with all the departments.
So it's a combination of things. Number one is the drainage utility could theoretically buy this whole thing, and then the street department would pay for the time that it uses it. We're sort of splitting it on the front end of the purchase, should you approve this, so that we have that split done. We'll charge the drainage utility for the time that our folks are in it doing the work. And of course, when it's being used by the street department, there's no added expense for that. So the savings in this particular budget year that Mike is speaking about, and Tim and I have been discussing this for quite a while, would be the fact that we're getting a number of projects done that were in the plan. Because we're doing it internally, we don't have any profit margin that a contractor might have. Contractors are extremely busy right now, so we're getting very high quotes for projects. And you have a very creative team in the street department that can go out and get this work done. So what we anticipated to spend in line items like collection system replacement, the plan is being worked. It's just coming in for less money than what we'd anticipated.
Nice, very nice.
And I guess I might have missed, so how quick can you lay your hands on it if it's approved?
We have a commitment from the manufacturer to do a 45-day turnaround, so if you were to give us consent, we could.
So we pretty much won't have it this summer, but we'd have it by
That's
early
not
fall?
necessarily true, because they do keep them on hand frequently as they move them through the dealership. That's just worst-case scenario number. More than likely, they have one available. We went to all these different pieces of equipment and operated and made sure that they'd work for the needs that we have. So at that time, they had one available. Whether it's still there or not, I don't know. But
Just can't get the color you want or the leather seats.
Well, if we could get a demo model, yeah, floor model, but, okay. Okay.
So, I have a question since Troy's up here. So how can you say in the plan that you were going to spend $17,000 for it and enter a 5-year agreement? Wasn't that a lease, or was that a lease?
Correct.
So you were considering a lease?
I was, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That wasn't a 5-year purchase plan then? I
Well, it
mean,
ends up being that way because they don't want it back, and I would never come in front of you and be able to recommend a lease. So yes, it was acquiring over time. We'd have the option of whether or not we wanted to buy it at the end. So what we did in this process was looked at, okay, a balloon on the front end of the purchase agreement or a balloon at the end of it. And we kept coming back to the fact that this is the piece of equipment that the department needs, the drainage utility needs, and it's got a useful life of 12 years.
is it still possible to obtain the gizmo for $17,000 and enter into the lease agreement?
Is it possible? Yeah, we were close to having that negotiated. We come to you because we don't want to pay that interest or that lease factor on the deal, and we're going to keep it anyway.
What was the interest? What was the lease? It wasn't interest, it was whatever they
Lease
call it
factor
on a
is
lease.
what it's called.
2.95 on the low bidder.
And did that fit into the $17,000 budgeted? No? What did it fit into? What was it?
We were pushing it out over almost 6 years.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Could you, along that line, can you kind of let us know, and the folks that really watch this,
Both of you.
but why sometimes we do a lease? There is, you were talking about buybacks, and there's some, you use leases new to us somewhat, and it was never something you liked to do, but economically you do. Can you explain why the lease works better than?
In certain circumstances, the lease has been advantageous. The loaders would be the most specific example. We were able to acquire brand-new loaders, set up the way that the city wanted them, because there's such a great value for the resale of those loaders at the end of the lease, that the buyout is very favorable for us to let them go and get a new set of loaders at the end of it. In that situation, the lease rate was very low. The manufacturers are happy to sell them as new, even though it's being leased, because they know that there's another market for them as soon as we're done with them. They monitor them, they know how many hours are on them, we pay a premium. This particular piece of equipment is basically just being financed over time. We could step away from it on any given year so that we can do the annual appropriation language and have that. However, that piece of equipment is not going to be as valuable in the secondary market after it's used. So they're not giving us a big opportunity to let it go back. We've looked at it for our police cars.
God,
Not
it'd be
sure.
great to see a cop in one of those.
Well, in the event we were to lease a police car,
Oh,
there's
that.
not a lot of value potentially at the end of it. Not that police drive fast and go over curbs and all those other things, they're just really hard miles. So we look at it for a value of what the manufacturer is looking to do with it, what the lease rate would be, and then the desirability for us to continue to have that piece of equipment.
I think that sometimes we forget about that. There's an aftermarket thing that, who would think, you know, but
You can
makes
see that
sense.
for the loaders though, because that's heavy equipment, that stuff's, I mean, it's built.
Big and expensive.
Yeah, and so there's gonna be some construction company's gonna wanna pick it up, and we take good care of it, so there's a value to them too. But this, I could see that, you know, we have one of these already?
We do. Yes, sir. It's reaching the end of its lifespan.
How old is it?
I wasn't
say
here when
like
it was purchased.
10 years.
Yeah, it's 10 plus
silly.
years
10
old.
years. It's reaching, so it hasn't reached it yet, so we could still use it for another year if we had to.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
that's
We
the
intend to use it until it is, you know, now that we
Alright.
own it, we can
Gotta
use
get
it
us
until
through
it's
this
dead.
year, 'cause they-
Well, yeah, they're using it now.
All right, I look for a motion. Thanks, guys.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm not gonna make a motion, because I am upset that, we have, you know, savings has been identified in the budget, because we're dealing with that right now with the new budget, and everyone says, oh, the budget's tight, oh, my, we can't, you know, we can't do this, we can't do that, but there's always savings in the budget, so I can't support leaving the budget and spending savings that didn't exist, you know, 12 months ago, and suddenly is found now. So I'm gonna be opposing this.
Okay, well, and it still makes sense to me, so I will recommend that the council accept the low and responsive quote received for a new rubber tracked excavator and allows purchasing this machine instead of acquisition to buy.
Very good. I'll second that. Discussion. Troy, could you address his thoughts on that?
I'd be happy to, thank you. Savings are always a word that you want to explore and see what it is, as you had done, council member. In the drainage utility, those dollars stay in there anyway. That utility is not one that we are having a challenge finding the revenue source to pay the expenses. It's the general fund, including the library, where our challenge is with the budget. So even if we didn't spend the money out of the drainage utility this year, that money would stay there, and we'd be looking, you know, potentially at what to do next.
Maybe a rate reduction.
Well, you have a lot of.
Lead balloon.
You have a lot of things you want to get done in that utility, including having the right equipment to save the money to have it last into perpetuity as that system continues to grow. Thank you, though.
And maybe,
Reduction. That's a good idea on drainage utility. And we have to go through a lot of hoops to even get the model done.
The model's been done, it's stood the test of time.
Right.
However, that, looking at the cash flow is definitely something we do on an annual basis, and then the projects that are out there and the hundreds of points of light that we heard about some 15 years ago.
The problem with that, and I'm with you, Woody, 100%. Talking to Kim, though, one of the things we have to deal with in the future is that eventually DEQ someone is going to require that we treat the stormwater. So we're gonna have to set up something in the future, and that's one reason why the budget has the savings in it, the cash, is because at some point in time, we're gonna have to address our 7 outflows that we have around the city that right now are just basically like, you know, wastewater used to be 100 years ago, it just dumps out. So we're gonna have to do some part of treating, filters, something, and that's coming down the road. So if we cut the rates now, theoretically, we'd have to jack them up again in the future. And that's one reason why they have money, so, anyway.
See, I see the drainage utility someday not only treating that water, but maybe pruning trees.
Exactly.
What a concept.
And they could do that too, so.
Where the water goes, there's trees, so. I'm sorry, we got off track. but Sometimes we just need to get this off our chests.
you got
So all
it,
those in favor say aye.
yeah. Aye,
Opposed?
No.
Thought we turned you.
but this one, not consent.
No, it doesn't go to consent.
You don't want
I
to-
mean, I think there's enough obvious,
Yeah, you guys have to, you must return.
So you must have your moment. All right, we'll put that on the council calendar.
And if you park the thing out front and offer us rides, it still won't change my mind. But do that anyway.
Kenny? And this is another rare moment. This is like 2 months in a row we've seen Kenny Gabriel from our fire department. Pretty exciting to see you here at Public Works.
It is
Kenny.
my pleasure to be
Welcome.
here. Thank you. What we have today is what I think is a real feel-good story. In 2007, we kind of entered into an agreement with North Idaho College where our ability to provide certain services to the community were kind of stretched to the limit, and those services were CPR and first aid classes. And what we found was we were the only department in the county that was offering these classes. So we talked to workforce training and kind of set up a partnership with them, and then that grew to an EMT class that's stuffed every year, which grew into a Firefighter 1 basic firefighter academy that's was done at our Station 2 with the tower. And part of that class is classroom and part of it is hands-on. And what we used from the beginning was our fire apparatus to do the training, the wear and tear on that. They maybe don't take care of the students, don't take care of it quite the way we do. Kind of the hope always was to get them something that they could call their own. Well, through our general obligation bond and how thankful we are for that, we had a couple spare fire engines. One came last time and we surplus that, gave it to a rural fire department. And this one, our E1, a 1999 pumper, we really think that that could still have some life for the college and for the academy. Our hope is that council will surplus that, and then when you do so, gift that to North Idaho College for the use specifically in the fire academy. What we'll do with them is during the academy, it'll be housed at Station 2, because that's where all the hands-on training is. Then it's out of our area, and they'll be doing it out at their diesel shop, is where they were stored then. So I'm asking this committee to look at that and ask any questions that you have.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask where the picture is, but
Do we forget a picture? Don't tell Sam Taylor that. He'll give it to me good for that one. But I'll send you a picture. How's that?
There you go.
yes, I'm confident by the time we get to the council meeting, we'll have a picture. So.
Okay.
Dan.
Hi, Kenny. So where's their diesel shop? You just mentioned the diesel shop. Is
Have
that-
it at NIC?
Is it at K-Tech or is it out at
Yes.
WTC?
Yeah.
I can answer yes, because
Yeah.
I got my truck worked on and it's
Okay.
right next door.
Yeah.
So it's out at the K-Tech.
And they'll do all the maintenance on it. And
Okay. So this is agreement with who exactly? Is it an agreement with NIC, or I see that this class is offered through the Workforce Training Center, which is kind of a different thing. Is it
it's
with,
all through NIC. It's all
it is through
through North Idaho
NIC?
College.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Does the class get college credit?
This one does not, but
Okay.
we're trying to get it to, that's a great question too, and thank you for reminding me. What we're trying to do is to get it to a full 2-year degree program.
Oh, cool.
Which will be for credit, and they are reviewing the Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 right now to be a 4-credit class, which is important, because then you can get financial aid for it.
Okay. So it does go over to NIC?
Yes, sir.
It's not like going to a private, like just to the instructor or
No, sir.
whatever?
No, it'll be through NIC.
Okay, I was just, see, the thing comes up, whenever something comes up with NIC, I want to think, is there anything that we can, I mean, I would love to give it to them, but is there anything we can quid pro quo that we can, something that's been lingering where we've had an issue or something with them? I mean,
So-
it wouldn't be with your department, but I know that there's other people who will say, like I know Bill Greenwood wanted some credits for the skate park and for the, with NIC and their tennis courts that they obliterated. And there's a deal with the statue down there that we put in and trying to get that relocated. And I was just wondering if there was anything, any kind of capital we could generate from our goodwill.
I would leave that to the expertise of our city council to
Okay.
come up with that. They have done stuff for us with the program. They've done, their construction company, or their carpenter schools built sheds, and they're gonna do stuff with maintenance of equipment. So we're getting something back from them. As for anything bigger like that, Councilman, I can't give you an answer on that. to be
Okay,
honest
I
with
was just wondering if that was it, just throw that out there.
I was thinking at the very last meeting that when they broke out the financing for the Four Corners, I thought you were the one that said, is NIC giving money? And it's like 300 and some thousand. You said,
So they are.
great.
It was just an example of
Okay.
where in the past, I mean, that something like that should have been rather smooth going, and yet there were all kinds of speed bumps and stuff happening. And so I was just wondering if there was anything else lingering that someone had an issue with where they're trying to get something done, I don't know.
Sorry, Kenny, that you
No,
have to
no.
listen to this.
No, it's
but-
what-
But no, I mean, it's just, I mean, we're doing something, and I support it, I think it's a good thing, but I just think that it would be kind of cool if they realized how nice we were.
We'll remind
And that
them.
it would just remind them that
Yes, sir.
we've been very nice to them, so
We'll do that,
hopefully
yes,
that pays off down the road.
Okay.
So look for a
Then I
motion.
guess I will again make a motion. I'll get to make the fun one that we will recommend that the council and mayor allow the fire department to surplus a 1999 E1 pumper and gift it to NIC for use at the firefighters academy.
Second.
Second. Been moved and second. Any other? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we'll look for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Been moved and second. We're out of here. Thanks, you guys.
Okay.
Trying to keep.